Let me ask you a question, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. How much is 1 hour of your time worth? Take a moment. Consider it. Whatever number just came to your mind, $20, $50, $100, perhaps considerably more, I'm going to tell you something that may disturb you. That number is completely meaningless, not approximately meaningless, not partially meaningless, completely meaningless. And the fact that you have a number at all, the fact that you answered that question without hesitation, reveals the very trap that keeps most people struggling financially their entire lives. Now, why do I say that? Because the question itself is malformed. It's like asking someone, what does an empty bucket weigh? They'll give you the weight of the bucket itself, perhaps 2 pounds, perhaps 3. But that's not what you're really asking when you hire someone, is it? You're not asking about the container. You're asking about what they'll put in it. Fill that bucket with sand, and it weighs one thing. Fill it with water, and it weighs another. Fill it with gold, and the weight is the same, but the value is radically different. Time is the bucket. Most people spend their entire lives focused on the container when only the contents have ever mattered. They calculate their worth by the hour. They negotiate for better hourly rates. They feel they've advanced when the clock pays them slightly more, and all the while they've been measuring the wrong variable entirely. Here's the key. If you believe you are paid for your time, your earning capacity becomes a simple mathematical equation, and it's an equation you cannot win. There are only 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, roughly 2,000 working hours in a year. That's your ceiling. That's as high as you can possibly go. No matter how hard you work, the clock defeats you. You can sacrifice sleep. You can abandon weekends. You can surrender holidays and neglect family and grind yourself into exhaustion, and still the mathematics remain impassable. The person who believes they're paid for time has imprisoned themselves in a cell with precise dimensions, the dimensions of the calendar. Now here's something interesting. This belief is so deeply embedded in how people think about work and money that most have never questioned it. It feels like reality itself. It feels like common sense. When someone asks your hourly rate, you answer without hesitation, never stopping to wonder whether the question makes any sense at all. But it doesn't make sense. It's never made sense. Rollo May, the distinguished psychologist, observed that the opposite of courage in our society is not cowardice, it is conformity. And there you have the reason this error persists. Most people accept the time for money belief because everyone around them accepts it. They conform to a prison without ever examining its walls. They settle into cells with familiar dimensions because stepping outside requires the courage to question what everyone assumes. The Bible warns against following the crowd toward destruction. The wide road, it tells us, leads nowhere good. In matters of success and achievement, the majority view is rarely the truth. Let me tell you something which, if you really understand it, will alter your relationship with money immediately. When you hire someone for a specific task, you don't calculate how long it should take and pay accordingly. You calculate what the result is worth to you. When you choose a restaurant, you don't ask how many hours the chef worked. You ask whether the meal satisfies. When you purchase anything at all, a product, a service, an experience, you're calculating value received, not time invested. As buyers, we instinctively understand that we're paying for value. We just pretend otherwise when we become sellers. Watch yourself making purchasing decisions this week. Notice how you evaluate what you receive rather than how long it took. You've been applying this principle your entire life without recognizing it. The question isn't whether this is true. It obviously is. The question is why we abandon this understanding the moment we're on the selling side of the transaction. The most dangerous error is treating the time belief as obviously true simply because it's universally held. Universal belief is not evidence of truth, it's evidence of conformity. The second error is calculating your ceiling based on available hours rather than developable value. This turns a limitation of thinking into a limitation of life. After truly grasping what I've just shared with you, you can no longer innocently state your hourly worth. The question has been exposed for what it is: malformed, misleading, a trap disguised as common sense. You've been measuring the wrong variable entirely, the container instead of the contents. But if this belief is so obviously false, if it crumbles the moment we examine it, why do millions of people accept it? And more troubling still, if time isn't what determines income, Why do some people working the same hours earn 50 times what others earn? Something else must explain this disparity. Have you ever stopped to think about something that's been staring you in the face your entire working life? Two people can work identical hours and earn vastly different amounts. The marketplace treats them as if they exist in different universes, as if the same 60 minutes passing for one person were fundamentally different from the 60 minutes passing for another. If time had value, this would be impossible. Consider a hospital, any hospital in any city. The surgeon and the orderly may work the same 8-hour shift, same building, same clock on the wall. Same number of minutes passing, second by second, identical for both. Yet the surgeon earns in that single shift what the orderly earns in 3 months. Now, why do you suppose that is? Are the surgeon's hours somehow denser? Is her time made of different material? Does the clock move more slowly when she's operating, packing more minutes into each hour? Of course not. Her time is identical. 60 minutes for her equals 60 minutes for anyone else. The clock makes no distinction between surgeon and orderly, executive and janitor, entrepreneur and employee. But what she delivers during those hours, knowledge that means the difference between life and death, skill developed over decades of focused study, judgment refined through thousands of critical decisions, is radically different in its intensity. The marketplace responds accordingly. The market has never, not once in human history, rewarded time itself. It rewards something else entirely. The evidence is everywhere, hiding in plain sight. We've simply refused to see it because the implications challenge everything we believe about work and income. Two salespeople in the same company, same territory, same product, same hours, one earns 3 times what the other earns. Two restaurants on the same street, same operating hours, one thrives while the other barely survives. Two professionals with identical credentials, same office, same clients available, one builds wealth while the other struggles to pay bills. Same time, different compensation. If time had value, if hours themselves were what the market rewarded, these disparities could not exist. The market would pay equally for equal time. An hour would be worth what an hour was worth, regardless of who spent it or what they did with it. But that's not how markets work. That's not how markets have ever worked. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor of Rome, observed that a man's worth is no greater than his ambitions. Notice he said nothing about hours. Emerson noted that the world pays people not for what they know, but for what they do with what they know. Again, nothing about time. The pattern has been recognized throughout history by every serious student of success. Compensation follows contribution, not clock time. Here's what most people get wrong. When they observe these disparities, they explain them away with comfortable lies. Luck, they say, connections, unfairness, being in the right place at the right time. These explanations feel satisfying because they preserve the time equals money belief while explaining why it doesn't seem to work. They let us maintain the illusion that we'd be earning more if only circumstances were different. They're comfortable lies, nothing more. The great error is resenting those who earn more while working similar hours, rather than asking what they understand that you don't. The person who turns disparity into grievance learns nothing. The person who turns disparity into curiosity discovers everything. Now think about this. If time had value, an empty hour would be worth the same as a productive one. Staring blankly at a wall would pay the same as solving a critical problem. Sitting in a meeting where nothing happens would earn the same as making a decision that saves a company. Does that match your experience of how compensation actually works? It doesn't match anyone's experience because time isn't what's being measured. The marketplace is constantly revealing what it values. Every transaction, every salary, every payment is a message, a piece of information about what the world rewards. But most people refuse to read these messages because accepting them would require abandoning the comfortable belief that they're paid for showing up, for being present, for time served. People who believe they're paid for time focus on presence rather than production. They measure contribution by how long they stayed, not what they accomplished. They feel virtuous for putting in hours, regardless of what those hours produced. Watch them at work, checking clocks, counting down to quitting time. measuring their commitment by duration rather than results. The market notices, and the market responds. By now, the gap should be clear. The framework you've been using to understand income, time in, money out, cannot explain what you observe every day. Two people, same hours, wildly different results. The time belief collapses under the weight of evidence that surrounds you. Something else determines what people earn. Something else explains the disparity that has puzzled you, frustrated you, perhaps angered you your entire working life. If time has no value, if the marketplace has never once rewarded time itself, then what does it reward? What is the hidden variable that explains everything the time belief cannot explain? The answer is simpler than you might expect. I'd like to tell you about something that most people never learn, and of those who hear it, most never truly understand. Here's the truth that transforms everything. You are not paid for your time. You are paid for the value you create, deliver, or represent. Now let me say that again, because this is the foundation upon which everything else rests. You are not paid for your time. You are paid for value. Time is merely the period during which value may or may not be created. It's that simple. And yet that simple truth, truly understood, demolishes the ceiling on income. It explains every disparity that time belief could not explain. It reveals why the surgeon earns more than the orderly, why some salespeople outperform others tenfold, why the market rewards certain people as if they were different species entirely. They're not different species. They simply understand something the majority doesn't grasp. Only value has value. Think of it this way. The farmer knows this instinctively, even if he's never put it into words. He can sit in his field for 1,000 hours, 1,000 days, and not a single crop will grow unless he plants, cultivates, and tends. His compensation comes from the harvest, from what grew, not from how long he sat watching the sky. Time is the field. What he does with it determines the return. The same sun shines on every acre. The same rain falls on every farm. The same seasons pass. The same hours and days and months roll forward identically for everyone. But some farmers harvest abundance, while others harvest nothing. Some fill granaries, while others face empty bins and hungry winters. The difference is never time. Time treats all farmers equally. The difference is what was planted and tended during that time. The seeds chosen, the care given, the weeds pulled, and the pests fought, and the irrigation managed. The farmer who produces more receives more, not because he spent more hours under the same sun, but because he created more value in the same hours. The mind, like the land, doesn't care what you plant. It will return whatever you give it. Corn or weeds, value or emptiness, achievement or stagnation. The field is neutral. The time is neutral. What you do with both determines your harvest. William James, the great Harvard psychologist, declared that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes. When your attitude shifts from seller of time to creator of value, everything changes. The questions you ask change. The activities you prioritize change. The way you measure your days changes. You stop asking, how can I work more hours? And start asking, how can I create more value? These two questions lead to entirely different lives. The person asking about hours seeks overtime, second jobs, longer shifts. They grind against the ceiling that can never be broken because it's built into the structure of time itself. They exhaust themselves running faster and faster on a wheel that goes nowhere. The person asking about value seeks skill, development, leverage, impact. They find the ceiling was never real. It was only a belief that created its own limitations. They discover that value can always be developed, multiplied, expanded. There is no upper limit to how much value a human being can learn to create. Emerson said a man is what he thinks about all day long. The time thinker becomes a time filler. Their days revolve around duration, around showing up, around putting in the hours. The value thinker becomes a value creator. Their days revolve around contribution, around results, around making a difference that the world recognizes and rewards. The Bible tells us plainly, as ye sow, so shall ye reap. The sowing is not time. The sowing is value. The seeds you plant in the field of your work, the contribution you make to others, the problems you solve and the needs you meet. The reaping is compensation. The soil doesn't care whether you sat in the field for 1 hour or 100. It returns what you planted, nothing more and nothing less. Now here's something you can test immediately. Think of any purchase you've made recently, a meal, a service, a product, anything at all. Ask yourself, when you decided what to pay, did you calculate how long it took to produce, or did you calculate what it was worth to you? You'll realize you've always paid for value. Every transaction you've ever made on either side of the exchange has been a value transaction disguised as a time transaction. The market has always known what time is worth. Time is worth nothing. Value is worth everything. Now apply the same logic to what you provide. Are you focused on filling time or creating worth? Are you measuring your contribution by the clock or by the results? The answer reveals whether you're approaching work as a seller of hours or a creator of value. The marketplace isn't some arbitrary external force that rewards and punishes at random. The marketplace is millions of people expressing what they need. It's humanity speaking through transactions. When compensation is high, humanity is saying, this matters, this helps, this solves a problem we care about. When compensation is low, humanity is saying, this doesn't create much value for us. The market is honest, brutally, unflinchingly honest. The immediate implication is staggering. Your income has no ceiling except the ceiling of the value you create. Develop more capacity to create value, and you develop more capacity to earn. There is no limit, no wall, no barrier, only the endless frontier of how valuable you can become to others. The viewer who entered this chapter believing they were paid for time now possesses a different framework entirely. The disparity makes sense. Different value, different reward. The ceiling vanishes. Value can always be developed. The question that shapes work and life shifts from time to value. But understanding alone isn't enough. Can this principle be demonstrated? Can we see it operating in specific observable situations beyond the surgeon and the orderly? Let's examine how the value principle functions in the real world and what it reveals about how compensation actually works. Let me tell you something that most people resist hearing, even after they've understood the principle we just discussed. Hourly pay is not a statement about what you're worth. It's not a measure of value. It's not even really about time at all. It's an administrative convenience, nothing more. When employers pay by the hour, they're using time as a proxy measure, a convenient way to structure payroll and track attendance. But what they're actually purchasing is the value they expect to be produced during those hours. They're buying anticipated results, predicted outcomes, expected contribution. Watch what happens when value disappears. The moment an employee stops creating value, regardless of how many hours they continue showing up, the position becomes endangered. The moment production falls below what compensation requires, the arrangement ends. No employer in history has ever kept paying someone for sufficient hours while receiving nothing valuable in return. Here's the key. The hiring decision reveals what's really being purchased. Listen to interview questions. They ask what you can do, what you've accomplished, what problems you can solve, what results you've produced in the past, what skills you bring to the position. They never ask how good you are at sitting still for 8 hours. They never evaluate your ability to be present without creating anything. Because presence isn't what they're buying. Value is what they're buying. Time is just how they track it. Now think of it this way. Consider a man standing in front of a cold stove, arms folded, waiting. He says to the stove, "Give me heat, and then I'll add the wood." But the stove cannot work that way. The fuel must come first. Then the heat follows. The sequence cannot be reversed. He can stand before that stove for hours, days, years, demanding heat before providing fuel, and the stove will remain forever cold. The stove doesn't negotiate. The stove doesn't make exceptions. The stove simply operates according to the mechanics of how stoves work. Many people approach the marketplace exactly this way. Pay me more, they say, and then I'll provide more value. They want the reward before the contribution. They want the harvest before the planting. They want heat before fuel. But the marketplace, like the stove, operates according to mechanics that cannot be negotiated. Value must come first. Compensation follows. Those who understand this add fuel continuously, developing skills, expanding capability, increasing contribution. Those who don't stand before cold stoves for entire careers, waiting for warmth that cannot come until they change their approach. The Bible states plainly, "As ye sow, so shall ye reap." This isn't poetry. It's not metaphor. It's mechanics. What you plant determines what grows. What you give determines what returns. The employer is simply a particular kind of soil. Plant valuable contribution and valuable compensation returns. Plant mere presence, mere hour filling, mere showing up, and you'll receive exactly what presence is worth in a world where presence isn't the product anyone's buying. Let me show you how this operates in a situation you can observe this week. Pay attention to how businesses actually make compensation decisions. Notice that raises go to those who produce more, not those who stay later. The employee who creates measurable value gets promoted, gets recognized, gets rewarded, regardless of whether they work 50 hours or 30. The employee who works 50 hours while producing nothing is in danger, while the one working 30 hours while producing brilliantly is secure and advancing. Notice that in interviews, the questions revolve entirely around capability and contribution. What did you accomplish in your last position? How did you handle this challenge? What results can we expect if we hire you? These aren't time questions. They're value questions. Notice that terminations happen when value delivered falls below compensation paid. The stated reason may be restructuring or performance issues or any number of euphemisms, but the underlying mathematics is always the same. The equation didn't balance. The value created didn't justify the value paid. Aristotle observed that excellence is not an act, but a habit, and habits produce results, not merely time passed. The person who has developed habits of excellence, who habitually creates value, habitually solves problems, habitually contributes more than they cost, finds that compensation follows their contribution as reliably as the shadow follows the object. Now here's the common error, and it's a dangerous one: believing that presence equals contribution, that sitting at a desk for 8 hours is the same as creating 8 hours of value. That activity is achievement. It isn't. Activity and achievement are not synonyms. A person can be tremendously active, answering emails, attending meetings, filing reports, looking busy, while creating essentially nothing of value. Another person can work half those hours but solve a problem that saves the company millions. The market doesn't reward the activity, it rewards the result. Another error: feeling entitled to compensation for time invested rather than value delivered. This attitude guarantees lifelong frustration because it misunderstands the fundamental transaction. The marketplace owes you nothing for your time. It owes you only what your contribution is worth. The viewer who grasps this sees through the administrative fiction of hourly pay. They understand that every employer is actually purchasing value with time as a convenient measurement unit. They've reframed their entire relationship with work. The question is never, did I put in my hours? The question is always, did I create enough value to justify my compensation and more? But here's something we haven't yet addressed. The marketplace doesn't pay twice as much for twice the value. The relationship is far more interesting than that, and understanding it reveals where the real opportunity lies. Here's something interesting that most people never notice, even though it operates everywhere in plain sight. The marketplace doesn't pay twice as much for twice the value. It often pays 10 times as much for twice the value, sometimes 100 times as much. Now, why do you suppose that is? This is what I call the law of disproportionate rewards, and understanding it transforms how you approach your work, your development, and your entire professional life. Let me explain what I mean. Solutions to important problems are scarce, and scarcity commands premium prices. When something the world needs is difficult to find, when only a few people can provide it, the market responds with intense demand and extraordinary compensation. Think about it this way. A company that's 10% better than its competitors doesn't capture 10% more of the market. It often captures 90% of the market. A professional who's 20% more effective than average doesn't earn 20% more. They might earn 500% more. The relationship between value and compensation isn't linear. It's exponential at the margins. Consider a ship's navigation. A vessel 1 degree off course will, over a short distance, arrive almost at its intended destination. perhaps a mile off, perhaps 2. Close enough. But extend that voyage to 1,000 miles, and that single degree of error leads to a completely different port, perhaps hundreds of miles from where the ship meant to go. Small differences, compounded over distance, produce enormous disparities. The same operates in the marketplace. Small differences in value creation, compounded over time and scale, produce enormous differences in reward. The ship that arrives precisely is celebrated. The cargo is unloaded, the captain is paid, the voyage is counted a success. The ship that misses by 5 miles is forgotten. The contract is lost. The opportunity passes to someone else. Emerson understood this when he wrote that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say the world would pay you slightly more for a slightly better mousetrap. He said the world would beat a path to your door. The demand would be overwhelming. The reward would be disproportionate. It doesn't matter if your mousetrap costs twice as much to produce or if you spend the same hours as your competitors. What matters is whether it works better. Better is what the market rewards, and it rewards better with disproportionate enthusiasm. Let me show you this principle operating in everyday situations. Observe how markets reward leaders in any field. The best restaurant in town isn't 10% busier than the average restaurant. It's packed every night while others sit half empty, waiting for customers who never come. The waiting list stretches weeks into the future. People drive from across the city, across the region to eat there, while the merely adequate restaurant across the street wonders what happened. The top salesperson in a company doesn't earn 20% more than the average salesperson. They earn 3 times what the average earns, 5 times, sometimes more. Same company, same product. Same territory, same hours available, radically different compensation because radically different value created. The most respected professional in their field doesn't charge slightly higher fees. They charge multiples. Their calendar is full while their competitors scramble for clients. The client who wants the best will pay whatever the best requires because the cost of not having the best is higher than the cost of affording them. This is the Pareto principle in action, what some call the 80/20 rule. Observed across countless domains, it shows that 20% of causes produce 80% of effects. A small number of people create a disproportionate share of value in any field. A small number of businesses capture a disproportionate share of customers. A small number of products dominate their categories. This isn't conspiracy. It isn't luck. It's the natural mathematics of excellence. William James observed that most people live far within their limits. They possess reserves of energy and capability they habitually fail to use. Those who push beyond those limits, those who develop capability that exceeds the average, find disproportionate rewards waiting. The air is fresher at the top, the sun shines earlier and later, and the crowd is smaller because so few make the effort to climb. Here's the error most people make. They assume linear relationships. If I work twice as hard, they think I'll earn twice as much. They plan their careers as if effort and reward existed in direct proportion, as if the market were a simple exchange of sweat for dollars. It isn't. It's never been that way. The goal isn't to be 5% better at everything. That scatters your improvement across too many dimensions. The goal is to be dramatically better at something that matters, to develop one area of value creation so thoroughly that you become unmistakably superior in that domain. Scattered improvement yields scattered results. Focused development creates disproportionate returns. Now think about what this means for you. Your task isn't to work more hours. We've already established that hours aren't what the market rewards. Your task isn't even to create slightly more value spread across everything you do. Your task is to become significantly better at creating specific, measurable value that the world needs. Identify where your contribution can matter most. Focus your development there. Become so good at that particular form of value creation that you stand out from everyone else attempting the same work. The market will notice. The market always notices. 1 hour daily of focused development in your chosen field, just 1 hour, consistently applied, creates 365 hours of improvement yearly. Over 3 years, that's more than 1,000 hours of deliberate development. While others scatter their growth across entertainment and distraction, you're building capability that compounds. The gap becomes insurmountable, and the rewards become disproportionate. We've established the principle, value, not time, determines compensation. We've examined the evidence. The marketplace rewards value through mechanics that operate everywhere, visibly, consistently. We've seen how disproportionate those rewards become at the margins of excellence. But knowing isn't the same as doing. Understanding a principle isn't the same as applying it to your Monday morning, your daily work, your ordinary life. How does this understanding change the texture of actual days? What does it mean to approach work with a value mindset instead of the time mindset? Let's examine the practical application that separates those who merely understand from those who actually transform. Let me ask you something about tomorrow morning. When you wake up and begin thinking about your day, when you contemplate the hours ahead and what you'll do with them, what question runs through your mind? For most people, the question is some variation of, what do I have to do today? They scan their obligations. They review their calendar. They make lists of tasks to complete, meetings to attend, emails to answer. They organize their hours around activities that must be performed, duties that must be discharged, boxes that must be checked. And then they go do those things one after another until the clock releases them. Here's the key. That question, what do I have to do today, is a time question. It organizes your day around duration. It turns you into a task completer, someone whose purpose is to fill hours with activities until those hours have passed. And task completers, I'm sorry to say, are interchangeable. Any warm body can check boxes. Any conscious person can attend meetings. Any employee can answer emails and file reports and perform the motions of work. The market pays accordingly. Now let me tell you about a different question, one that transforms everything about how you work. Tomorrow morning, instead of asking, what do I have to do today, ask this, what value can I create today? The shift sounds subtle, a few words changed, but the results are profound beyond anything the subtle wording suggests. What value can I create today is not a time question, it's a contribution question. It organizes your day around results, around impact, around making a difference that the world will recognize and reward. It turns you into a problem solver, someone who identifies needs and meets them, who sees gaps and fills them, who leaves things better than they found them. Problem solvers are not interchangeable. Their specific contribution matters. What they produce cannot be produced by just anyone, and the market pays accordingly. Think of it this way. Consider two ships setting sail on the same morning. The captain of the first ship asks his crew, what activities must we perform today? And so they raise sails, swab decks, prepare meals, coil ropes, check supplies, all the right activities. The crew stays busy from dawn to dusk. They're doing the work of sailing. They're performing the tasks that sailors perform. But no one asks where they're going. The captain of the second ship asks a different question. What progress toward our destination can we make today? His crew performs many of the same activities. The sails must still be raised, the decks still swabbed, the meals still prepared, but every decision serves the destination. Every activity is evaluated against a purpose larger than the activity itself. The crew doesn't just work, they navigate. At the end of a week, the first ship has been tremendously busy. The second ship has arrived somewhere. Activity without direction is motion without progress. You can fill every hour of every day with activity, legitimate, exhausting, demanding activity, and create nothing of value. You can work yourself to the bone doing things without ever accomplishing anything. The busy person and the productive person may look identical from the outside. Their calendars may be equally full, but one is generating value while the other is merely generating motion. William James observed that the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. Everyone wants to feel that they matter, that their work means something, that their contribution is recognized. But here's what most people miss. Appreciation follows contribution. Recognition follows results. The craving cannot be satisfied by filling time, only by creating value that others genuinely appreciate. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher who ruled Rome, counseled that we should not act as if we had 10,000 years to live. Life is short. Urgency demands that we focus on what matters. And what matters is contribution, not activity. Results, not motion. Value, not time. Now here's something practical you can do starting immediately. At the end of each workday, write down the value you created, not the hours you spent, not the tasks you completed, not the meetings you attended, or the emails you answered. The actual value: problem solved, results delivered, improvements made, contributions that mattered. If you struggle to identify value, that itself is valuable information. It means your efforts need redirection. It means you've been filling time instead of creating worth. It means the question you've been asking each morning has been the wrong question. Try this experiment for 1 week. Each morning, write down the value you intend to create, not tasks to complete, but outcomes to produce. Be specific. I will solve this problem. I will complete this project in a way that improves this metric. I will help this colleague accomplish this goal. I will create something that didn't exist before and that serves these people in this way. Each evening, assess what value actually emerged. Compare intention to result. Notice how this simple practice transforms which activities you prioritize. When value is the measure, you naturally gravitate toward high-value work. The low-value busyness that once filled your days begins to feel like what it is: distraction disguised as productivity. The task list doesn't disappear, but it becomes servant to value creation rather than master of your time. Here's another test you can apply: the interchangeability test. At the end of any day, ask yourself, could anyone have done what I did today? If the answer is yes, if a reasonably competent person with your job title could have produced the same results, then you've created commodity value. You've filled a slot. You've performed a function. And the market pays commodity prices for commodity contribution. But if your specific contribution mattered, if what you produced reflects your particular skills, your developed capability, your unique approach to problems, then you've created premium value. You've done something that not just anyone could do, and the market pays premium prices for premium contribution. The error is confusing busyness with productivity. A full calendar is not proof of value creation. It may be proof of value avoidance, hiding in activity to escape the challenge of real contribution. Some of the busiest people create the least value. Some of the least frantic create the most. The correlation between hours worked and value created is weaker than most imagine. Another error: measuring effort instead of outcome. The market is entirely indifferent to how hard you tried. It cares only about what you produced. The exhausted person who worked 80 hours and created nothing receives nothing. The rested person who worked 30 hours and created something wonderful receives accordingly. Effort is input. Value is output. Only output counts. After grasping this chapter, you possess a practical tool, the morning question, that immediately transforms your approach to work. You understand the distinction between task completion and problem solving. You can audit your own days for value created versus time filled. The abstract principle has become a concrete daily practice. But the morning question addresses today. What about tomorrow and the day after and the years ahead? If value determines income and you want greater income, you must become capable of creating greater value. How does someone systematically multiply their capacity for value creation? The answer reveals why some people's earnings grow year after year while others stagnate forever. Let me tell you about a simple practice that separates those who advance from those who plateau. 1 hour per day of focused study in your chosen field will, within 3 years, position you among the recognized experts, not among the merely competent, among the experts, the authorities, the people others turn to when problems become serious. Now, why is that? Because 1 hour daily equals 365 hours yearly. In 3 years, you'll have invested over 1,000 hours in becoming more valuable, more skilled, more knowledgeable, more capable of creating results that the market rewards. 1,000 hours. While others watch television, scroll through distractions, fill their evenings with entertainment, you invested in multiplication. Here's the key. Self-development doesn't add to your value. It multiplies it. If an hour of your work currently produces a certain amount of value, what happens when you become more skilled, more knowledgeable, more efficient, more capable of solving problems others can't solve? You create more value in the same time. The hour itself remains 60 minutes. But what fills that hour, the quality of your contribution, expands. The same clock produces greater results. This is leverage. This is multiplication. And the returns compound year after year, building on themselves, accelerating rather than merely accumulating. Think of it this way. Consider an acorn. Within that small nut lies the potential for an oak tree, a magnificent oak that will stand for centuries, provide shade for generations, produce thousands of acorns of its own. The potential is extraordinary. But that potential requires development, soil, water, sunlight, time, care. The acorn that remains on stone never becomes the oak. The potential stays locked inside, unrealized, until the acorn rots and the possibility dies with it. A person's capacity for value creation is similar. Within you right now lies potential far greater than what you currently express. The capability to solve bigger problems, serve more people, create results that would astonish your present self. The potential is there. It's always been there. The question is whether you'll cultivate it. The Bible counsels that whoever seeks wisdom will find it. The seeking is the daily investment, the hour given to development, to study, to deliberate practice of your craft. The finding is the compound return, the growing capability that opens doors and attracts opportunities and creates value that the market recognizes and rewards. Emerson observed that the world makes way for the person who knows where they're going. But knowing where you're going requires developing the capability to get there. Dreams without development remain fantasies. Ambition without skill remains frustration. The path from where you are to where you want to be is paved with developed capability, and capability develops through investment. Here's the arithmetic that changes everything. 1 hour daily equals 365 hours yearly. That's the equivalent of 9 40-hour work weeks devoted purely to becoming better at what you do. In 3 years, you accumulate over 1,000 hours. In 5 years, nearly 2,000. In a decade, more than 3,500 hours of focused development. Now consider, what would 3,500 hours of deliberate, focused improvement do to your capability? How much more valuable would you become? How much more intensely would the market reward your contribution? The compound effect operates in human development just as it operates in finance. Small investments, consistently made, accumulate into fortunes. Small improvements, consistently applied, compound into expertise. The person who invests 1 hour daily isn't just slightly better than the person who invests nothing. They're exponentially better because each hour builds on the hours before. Let me show you where this operates in the world around you. Observe those who've out-earned you over the past decade. Not the lucky ones. Luck isn't a strategy. The ones who've consistently produced greater value and received greater reward. You'll find they invested in development. They read while others rested. They studied while others socialized. They deliberately improved their capability while others assumed their capability was fixed. This isn't accusation. It's diagnosis. The prescription is available to anyone willing to take it. 1 hour daily, that's all. 1 hour redirected from distraction to development, from consumption to creation, from entertainment to investment. What would you study? Whatever develops your capacity to create value in your chosen field. If you're in sales, study persuasion, human psychology, your product, your industry. If you're in management, study leadership, decision-making, strategy, the specifics of what your people do. If you're in any profession at all, study the masters of that profession, how they think, how they work, how they produce results that others cannot match. The successful don't protect secrets. They write books, they give lectures, they teach courses. The knowledge is available. The only question is whether you'll seek it. Now here's the error most people make. They scatter their development across too many areas. They dabble, they sample. They learn a little about many things rather than a lot about one thing. But depth beats breadth. The professional who is a mile deep in their specialty out-earns the one who is an inch deep in 20 subjects. The market rewards expertise, not dilettantism. When a serious problem arises, people don't look for someone who knows a little about everything. They look for someone who knows everything about that specific problem. Focus your development where it multiplies your specific value creation. Don't try to improve at everything simultaneously. Identify the one capability that, if dramatically improved, would most increase the value you can create, and pour your developmental hours into that single channel until you've achieved meaningful superiority. Scattered improvement yields scattered results. Focused development creates disproportionate returns. The viewer who understands this chapter sees income growth differently. It follows capability growth. The gap between them and higher earners is largely a gap in developed capability, and gaps can be closed. Not overnight, not without effort, but systematically, inevitably, through the compound effect of consistent investment. The 1 hour investment isn't optional for anyone who wants to escape the ceiling. It's essential. It's the price of admission to higher levels of value creation and the higher rewards those levels command. We've covered the principle, the evidence, and the application. But there's a deeper question we haven't yet addressed. If value is what matters, and service to others is how value is created, what does this mean for how we think about work itself? Is there something more here than mere income strategy? I'd like to tell you about something that should bring you peace. Throughout everything we've discussed, the principle of value over time, the evidence from the marketplace, the practical applications to daily work, there's been a thread we haven't fully examined. And this thread, once grasped, transforms not just how you earn, but why you work at all. Here is the truth. The path to greater income is identical to the path of greater service. They're not two paths. They're not competing priorities you must balance. They're not trade-offs you must navigate. They're the same path. Now, why do I say that? Because value, by its very definition, is something that benefits others. You cannot create value in isolation. Value is created when you solve someone's problem, meet someone's need, improve someone's situation, make someone's life better in some way. The moment you focus on creating value, you automatically focus on serving others. Money cannot be sought directly. I've studied this truth for years, and it never changes. Money is an effect. It's a shadow cast by value. It has no independent existence of its own. It depends entirely on the value that creates it. Think of the relationship between an object and its shadow. The shadow has no substance. You cannot grab a shadow. You cannot possess a shadow independent of its object. The shadow moves only when the object moves. The shadow exists only because the object exists. Money is the shadow. Value is the object. Those who chase money directly are trying to grab shadows. They grasp at air. They clutch at darkness. They exhaust themselves pursuing something that cannot be captured through pursuit, because the thing they're chasing isn't really there. Only its source is there, only the value that casts the shadow. Those who focus on creating value find money following them automatically. They don't chase, they create, and the shadow follows the object as reliably as night follows day. This is not mysticism. This is mechanics. The marketplace is simply a massive system for exchanging value. You create value for others, they create value for you. The medium of exchange is money, but the substance being exchanged is always value, always contribution, always service, always something that benefits another person. The Bible promises that those who give will receive, pressed down, shaken together, running over. This isn't magic, and it isn't metaphor. It's the mechanics of how value exchange works. Give value, receive value. Serve others, be served in return. The system operates with mathematical precision. Emerson, who understood these principles as well as anyone who ever lived, observed that it is impossible for a man to be cheated by anyone but himself. Create genuine value, and the return is guaranteed. Perhaps not immediately, perhaps not from the source you expected, perhaps not on your schedule, but inevitably, certainly, as a matter of mechanics rather than luck. The person who asks, "How can I help more?" is asking the same question as, "How can I earn more?" Let that sink in. The question the generous person asks, "How can I be of greater service?" is economically identical to the question the ambitious person asks, "How can I increase my income?" They sound different, they feel different. One seems selfless, the other seems selfish. but they lead to the same place by the same road. Serve more, earn more. It's that simple. Now here's what this understanding does to work itself. If you're just selling hours, if you see work as time exchanged for money, a burden endured to collect a paycheck, then work is something to minimize. You want fewer hours for more money. You want to give less and get more. You're in an adversarial relationship with your own work, trying to escape it whenever possible. But if work is understood as service, as value creation for others, then it transforms from burden to purpose. The have to becomes get to. The obligation becomes opportunity. You're no longer trading away pieces of your life for money. You're using pieces of your life to serve others, to make a difference, to create something that matters. Work becomes meaningful, not because you've deceived yourself, not because you've adopted a positive attitude to mask a negative reality, but because you've seen clearly what work actually is, an exchange of value, a form of service, a way of contributing to others while receiving contribution in return. Now let me show you how this operates in the people around you. Observe the most prosperous people you know, not the schemers and manipulators, but the genuinely successful. Study how they think about their work. You'll find they're focused on contribution. They think constantly about how to help more, serve better, solve bigger problems for more people. The money follows. They don't chase it, it chases them. Now observe those who focus primarily on getting money for themselves. Watch their approach to work. You'll find constant struggle, endless frustration, perpetual resentment. They feel cheated. They feel underpaid. They feel like the world owes them more than it's providing. They're chasing shadows. Here's the practical test for this week. In every interaction, ask yourself, how can I be useful here? Not what can I get from this, but what can I give to this? Approach conversations, meetings, projects, and relationships with service as your orientation. Watch what happens. Watch how people respond to you differently. Watch how opportunities appear that weren't there before. Watch how your reputation shifts without any deliberate reputation building. Watch how the shadow begins to follow you rather than flee from you. Now I must warn you about an error that will destroy this principle's power, treating service as technique rather than truth. Those who serve merely to get, who put on the appearance of generosity while calculating returns, will find their manipulation transparent. Others sense inauthenticity. The market senses inauthenticity. The returns will disappoint. Service must be genuine, or it isn't service at all. Another error, expecting immediate returns for value created. The harvest doesn't come the day after planting. The farmer who plants in spring doesn't harvest until fall. The investment of service compounds over time, often in ways you cannot track or predict. Trust the process. Value created always returns. It returns on its own schedule, not yours, but it always returns. The viewer who grasps this chapter sees that income, pursuit, and service are unified. The question, how do I earn more, has transformed into, how do I serve more? And they're asking the same question. Work itself has shifted from something endured to something meaningful. We stand at the final threshold. The principle is clear. Value, not time, determines income. The evidence is established. The application is understood. The deeper meaning, service as the path to prosperity, has been revealed. One question remains. What does it mean to live with the ceiling removed? What becomes possible when you truly understand that your income has no limit except the limit of the value you develop the capacity to create? Let me take you back to where we began. I asked you a question. How much is 1 hour of your time worth? And whatever number came to your mind, I told you it was meaningless. I told you the question itself was malformed, like asking what an empty bucket weighs when you're really asking about the contents. Now you understand why. Time is the bucket. It weighs the same whether empty or full of gold. What matters, what has always mattered, is what fills it, the value you create, the contribution you make, the problems you solve, and the lives you improve. You've spent years, perhaps decades, focused on the bucket itself, counting hours, calculating wages, hitting the same ceiling again and again, and wondering why life felt so limiting. Now you see that the bucket was never the point. Here's what I want you to understand. That feeling of being pressed down, limited, trapped, The sense that there's a ceiling above you and no way through it was never imposed by the economy. It was never created by your credentials, your age, your background, your industry, your boss, or your circumstances. It was created by a single false belief that you are paid for your time. Demolish that belief and the ceiling vanishes. Not because circumstances change, not because the world suddenly becomes more generous, not because luck finally finds you. The ceiling vanishes because you finally see clearly, and what you see is that the ceiling was never really there. It was a shadow cast by a belief, nothing more. Your income has no ceiling except the ceiling of the value you create. And value can always be developed. There is no upper limit to skill. There's no maximum knowledge you're permitted to acquire. There is no cap on how efficiently you can work, how creatively you can solve problems, how many people you can serve with what you've learned to do. The question, how many more hours can I work, has a ceiling. The clock runs out. The calendar empties. But the question, how much more valuable can I become, has no ceiling whatsoever. Think about what that means. Every successful person who has ever lived was once less capable than they eventually became. Every expert was once a beginner. Every master was once a novice. The distance between where they started and where they finished was crossed not by finding more hours, but by becoming more valuable in the hours they had. You can do the same thing, not because you're special, but because you're human, and humans can develop, learn, grow, and expand their capacity to contribute. Throughout history, every teacher of success has understood this truth. Emerson wrote that we must make ourselves useful, and usefulness would be rewarded. The Bible declares that we reap what we sow, that the harvest follows the planting with mechanical certainty. William James discovered that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes, and the attitude shift from seller of time to creator of value alters everything. The wisdom is unanimous because the truth is universal. Now let me tell you how to use this understanding, starting today. Set goals in value terms, not income terms. Most people set income goals. I want to earn X dollars. But income goals focus on the shadow, not the object. They aim at the effect rather than the cause. Better to set value goals. I want to become capable of solving this level of problem. I want to serve this many people with this quality of contribution. I want to develop this skill to this degree of mastery. Achieve the value goals, and the income goals follow automatically. Chase the shadow, and it flees. Move the object, and the shadow follows. Ask value questions every day. Not just tomorrow morning, but every morning for the rest of your life. What value can I create today? At day's end, what value did I create? What problems did I solve? What did I contribute that mattered? Invest in capability multiplication, 1 hour daily of focused development in your chosen field. Not scattered improvement across everything, but focused development in the specific area where your value creation can grow most dramatically. Compound the returns. Let the interest earn interest. Watch the gap between you and your former ceiling grow wider every month. Remember the service income identity. When you find yourself asking, how do I earn more? Translate the question immediately. How do I serve more? How do I help more? How do I contribute more value to more people? The questions are identical. The path is the same. And understand, truly understand, that the marketplace is the most honest mirror you will ever encounter. It reflects back exactly what you give to it. No more, no less. It cannot be fooled. It cannot be cheated. It cannot be manipulated into giving you more than your contribution deserves. But it also cannot withhold what your contribution earns. Create value and receive value. It's that simple, and it works. The error now would be believing you've understood without acting. Understanding without application is entertainment, not transformation. You can nod at everything I've shared, agree with every principle, see the truth in every example, and continue to live exactly as you've been living, trapped beneath a ceiling that vanished the moment you saw through it. Don't let that happen. The ceiling only stays gone when you begin measuring value created instead of hours worked, when you develop capability instead of merely consuming time, when you serve others with genuine intention rather than minimal effort. The truth has power only when applied. You stand at a turning point. Behind you lies the path you've been walking, the time for money belief, the hourly ceiling, the frustration of limits that seemed immovable. Ahead of you lies a different path, one where your income has no ceiling except the value you create, where development is investment rather than expense, where work is service rather than burden. What remains is choice. Will you continue filling time, or will you begin creating value? Will you keep measuring your worth by the clock, or will you measure it by your contribution? Will you stay beneath the ceiling, or will you rise through it now that you see it was never really there? The choice, as always, is yours, and that choice makes all the difference. Here's the truth you now possess. The ceiling on your income was never made of circumstances. It was made of a belief. That belief has been demolished. The ceiling is gone. What you do next is up to you. Start today, not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are right or circumstances improve or the time feels better. Today, ask yourself, what value did I create this morning? What will I create this afternoon? What skill can I develop this week that lets me create more value next month? What contribution can I make today that serves others and moves me further down this path? The answers will change your life. You have nothing to lose, but you have your whole life to win.